I'm a history guy, and I like to talk about it. People want to know what's going on now, and they want to know what's going to be coming up. So this kind of covers a little bit of all of that, and hopefully I can answer some questions as we get going. But so first of all, what is historic Wagner Farm? Many people, even today, when I was getting on the Zoom, several of you mentioned that you drive by the farm every day. And that's probably the most common comment that we get is I drive by the farm and I see the cows. Fewer people stop at the farm, unfortunately, to see us, although a great many do. But historic Wagner Farm is a facility of the Glenview Park District. The Glenview Park District purchased the property in 2000 and opened the facility. And we used the name Historic Wagner Farm to differentiate it from Wagner Farm when the Wagners owned it. We're not always great about putting the historic on there, but that is the difference. When the Wagners owned it, it was just Wagner Farm. The Glenview Park District facility is Historic Wagner Farm. So first, a bit of history. This is Johann and Katharina Wagner. They are the first Wagners to come to this area. They immigrate on Christmas Eve of 1858 is when they get off the boat at Chicago. And they first live in Grosse Pointe, which is now Wilmette. That's where they settled. Grosse Pointe was a German Catholic community, and that was the reason that they went there. They were looking for people that they could speak with, as they probably weren't fluent in English yet, and who were of a similar faith, and they were looking for land. They eventually land close to the property here at, where Historic Wagner Farm is located, but just catty corner. So the southeast corner of Lake Avenue and Wagner Road is the property that Johann eventually purchases. There's a Glenview fire station there currently that looks like a barn. It was made to kind of mimic Wagner Farm in style. That was Johann and Katharina's farm, and that is where the story begins. Johann does pretty good for himself. He eventually purchases quite a bit of land. He ends up owning around 91 acres, kind of at his height. But the area at the time was very different than what it looks like today. In the 1850s and 60s, this was a wheat growing region of the country. This was very sparsely populated and quite far from the city at the time. So there was no village of Glenview yet, just Northfield Township with a scattering of farms, much like you could see in the picture here, growing grains. And these were what we call diversified farms today. They would have had livestock, but their primary focus was to grow stable commodities. So grain that they could store easily and then sell as the market allowed them. So we use a little diagram here to kind of illustrate this. This is called the nuclear city diagram, and it was developed by this theorist. His name is Johann von Thunen. He's a German theorist, and he wasn't thinking of Chicago when he developed this system. He was thinking of maybe Berlin or Hamburg, something like that. But his idea was that these dense inner cities form around factories and around high population areas. And they were basically as big as you could walk across in a day. At a time at which people moved by foot, they walked or they rode, animals that walked. A city could only grow as large as you could get across in a day. And then outside of that city, they would develop supporting rings. So very close to the city where land is expensive, you get dairy and market farming, things like produce production. Because those are perishable items and they have to be able to get to the city very quickly. Outside of that, you get things that are hard to move, forestry. So you don't want to have to move lumber very far, but it's not worth putting in that very inner ring. It can be a little bit farther out because it is shelf stable. Then grains and other forms of livestock production. This is where your wheat, and in America your corn, is grown. This is where your hogs are grown. It's where your eggs come from. Those types of things. And then the farthest out, he had a section that was ranching. That was basically just things that are very far away. So at the time that the Wagners moved to what is now Glenview, they were in that grain ring, quite far from the city, because transportation was slow, and that's what they could afford to move. Johann and Katerina have 10 children eventually, and one of the youngest is Thomas Wagner. Thomas is pictured in the wedding photo on the far left there as a young man. Thomas marries Julia Brackendorf in 1894. Now, there's a question here of when Thomas Wagner and Julia Brackendorf become Thomas and Julia Wagner. It's a good question. We don't know. Certainly by the time their children are talking about them, they refer to their father as Tom Wagner. I suspect that comes sometime around World War I. There's some other political reasons why he might have wanted to kind of anglicize his name, but he was certainly born Thomas Wagner, and would have been known by that name by his parents and siblings. They have 5 children, who are also pictured here. Frank is the oldest, the first son, born in 1894, and then followed by Lucy, who is on the right-hand side of the oval picture in the middle, in 1899. Rose on the left in 1903. Peter, the boy standing in the back, in 1904, and then Martin, who is the baby, in the middle, in 1910. So that is a boy in the very bottom of the oval, not a girl. He's still young enough that he's wearing a bit of a dress, but that is Martin. It's worth mentioning that Martin is the only child that moves off the farm and gets married. We don't know why. Frank does manage to branch out from the farm a little bit. Thomas eventually starts a gravel company, which Frank takes over, but he dies fairly young, and does not move away from the farm really. Lucy, Rose, and Peter never marry and never leave the farm. And many people remember Pete Wagner and Rose Wagner, who were the last two. That's Peter and Rose in the picture here, but they do not leave the farm. They stay here the rest of their life. By the time that the Wagners have moved to the property here that is historic Wagner Farm, which they moved here in 1902, they purchased the farm from who was a person who was likely their cousin, Peter Hoffman. The area was changing. Transportation had changed. The railroad had come out, and the what would become the village of Glenview had started to be settled or populated a little more heavily. And so Von Thunen's model gets kind of thrown out because now anyone who's close to a railroad can be in that inner ring and move things more easily. And this area becomes largely a truck farming area. They produce dairy and they produce perishable goods, fruits and vegetables for local markets. This is a picture of the Water Street Market in downtown Chicago. There were many markets like this. Of course, we know about Haymarket from the Haymarket Square riots. There were specialty markets like that where people would take specific types of goods, but most people in and around Northfield Township were involved in produce farming and dairy farming, including the Wagners. It should be noted at this time that what would become the village of Glenview was largely populated with white Protestant people who were coming out of the city. And they were in a little bit of conflict with the German Catholics that lived in the countryside. There was a bit of a split politically, I guess you would say, or theologically, certainly, between the country people who were largely Catholic and the city people who were largely Protestant. That split would remain for quite some time. The farm was purchased in 1902, and it would have looked very much like this. This picture is actually taken in spring of 1920. It was kind of the last picture taken before some major changes took place. But this is where the Wagner children would have grown up. They had a wooden frame farmhouse. It's what I call an upright and wing style farmhouse. They had a large bank barn that you can see in the background there, with various sheds attached to it. This barn was a holdout from the earlier period when this was a grain farming region and they needed the storage space to put all of the grain and straw and all of the hay that they would need for livestock. By the start of the second quarter of the 20th century, by 1925 or so, this barn was becoming a little bit obsolete in the area, a little bit unneeded. But nonetheless, it was here in 1920 when this picture was taken. If your screen's not blocked by the view of the people, on the far right-hand side of the picture, there is an electrical pole, what we call a telephone pole. It was running electrical lines. So it appears that the house had the potential to have electricity at this point or sometime before this. But this is very much a 19th century style farm. This is what this farm would have likely looked like in the 1880s or 1890s. Certainly in 1902 when they purchased the property. This is more or less what it looked like. In 1920, using the proceeds of his farming operation, Thomas decides to tear down his house and build a new one. So between spring and fall of 1920, the frame house in the upper picture is taken down to the foundation and a new brick house is put up in its place. He picks a very modern bungalow style house for the time, and it includes a couple of new amenities, electricity, which they may have had already, but it also has running water. This is a major step up from their old house. And being in the new style, it includes some nice craftsman features like closets with built-in chests of drawers and some nice electrical light fixtures throughout the house. So quite a step up for the family. Now, remember, the family is a minimum of 7 people at this point, and this is a 3-bedroom house. So and they're not young children. They're mostly teenagers and older. So there's quite a few people living in this house that is not overly large. It's sufficient, but not overly large, but a new house nonetheless. The other major thing that happens, you'll notice the barn in the lower left-hand corner is not the one from the old picture. In 1936, that barn was hit by lightning and burned down. And of course, in the midst of the Depression in 1936, they had to be careful with what they were spending money on. They did have an insurance policy that eventually helped them pay for the new barn, but the new barn they put up was much more suited for their current operation, which was small dairy farming, around 15 or 20 cows, and produce production, truck farming. So they didn't need the large bank barn that they had before, and they reconstruct a smaller version with a smaller equipment shed attached to it, as they no longer need as much hay storage. This is the house and the barn that still exist here today, and the barn is still in use and still has livestock in it. I should say that Thomas Wagner did quite well for himself as a farmer. He starts out by purchasing this 40 acres. He adds a number of acres to it. Peter claims that he owned 131 acres at one point. We're not exactly positive that that's true, but he was certainly farming above 80 or 90 acres pretty regularly throughout his life. His father passes away in 1900 and leaves him 11 acres on the other side of Wagner Road, which is where the Greek church is now located. And then after Thomas's death, some time after Thomas's death, his children inherit another 40 acres at Willow and Wagner Road from one of their aunts. So they amass quite a bit of land here for the time. Thomas also is elected as the Northfield Township Road Commissioner, which you may wonder how the name Wagner Road came to be. He named Wagner Road after himself when he was road commissioner. So that on top of his gravel company, you can see the Chicago connection there. He's the road commissioner and he owns a gravel company that they used to build roads out of. But he did pretty well for himself. But the 1920s is certainly his high point, I think. Like many farmers, the mid to late 20s was a very difficult time for anyone involved in agriculture, and then followed by the Depression and the Second World War. They were difficult times. So we focus our time period on the 20s for that reason, because we feel like that is the point at which this architecture was being developed and the point at which the family was kind of at their zenith. So the children eventually, they all except for Martin and Frank live to be quite old. They all make it into their 90s. Pete, Rose, and Lucy all make it into their 90s. Many people in Glenview remember or have memories of Pete Wagner, and of just seeing him around the farm and kind of stopping by the farm and talking to him. It wasn't until his death in 1991 that Rose really kind of steps out of the shadows. Rose continues to live in the house until her death in 1997. But she was kind of a quiet figure until the very end. She was deeply religious, a lifelong member of OLPH Catholic Church. You can see the photo in the background of President Kennedy. There are very few pictures of Rose that do not feature a picture of President Kennedy with her. She deeply loved the Kennedy family and featured them regularly throughout her life. When she passed in 1997, the farm was donated to OLPH Catholic Church to sell, to start a fund for their own use. That was the point at which there was some question as to whether the farm would become a subdivision or some sort of village property or something else. And eventually, through the hard work of many, many local people, the Park District passed a referendum to purchase the land and to open historic Wagner Farm in 2000. So a few things about our current farm. We have the largest cow herd in Cook County. Now, it is often stated that we're the last dairy farm in Cook County. That's not specifically true. There are a couple others very similar to our operation. The Schaumburg Park District operates a small living history dairy farm, and the zoo has a functioning dairy operation. But we own the most cows, and that number ranges from about 8 to 12 at any given time. But we have had cows consistently on the property, we believe, since the 1840s. So it's been a long-running history with the cattle. And one of the things people know, mention the most is they drive by. I drive by and see the cows. It's a favorite pastime of people in Glenview, I think. So We partner with a lot of outside organizations as well. The Friends of Wagner Farm, which is a non-for-profit 501c3 that helps us raise funds. North Shore Special Education District operates a school from the farm. It's called Be at the Farm. They help us grow fruits and vegetables that we sell through our community-supported agriculture system, where people buy shares and get weekly baskets of produce, and many other organizations that interact with the farm throughout the year. So it really is a place for the public to kind of gather in this kind of open space and enjoy our little bit of rural existence here. We also have one of the largest 4-H clubs in Illinois. If you're not familiar with 4-H, it is the oldest youth organization in the United States. It is set up through the Department of Agriculture, and it is administrated through the land grant colleges in each state. So the University of Illinois runs our 4-H program in Illinois. Every year we have about 35 kids that sign up to do projects that they largely keep at Wagner Farm. They all do a livestock project and a non-livestock project, and those can vary greatly from photography to weather to fiber arts, cooking, baking, gardening. It's an endless list of projects that they can do. But they also do things like market lambs and market hogs, dairy cows, chickens, beef cattle. There's any number of projects that they can work on. This has been a very popular program through the years, and we have consistently had a waiting list to get kids into the program for the last 18 years. So it's quite a strong program. We artificially pulled the number down to about 35 because that's how many kids we can handle. Otherwise, I think we'd be overrun a little bit. So, and we've grown. Wagner Farm for the last 20 years has hosted special events. We've had weddings and movie and film shoots here. We do wagon rides. We do school programs. We do outreach programs. When the farm opened around 2001, opened to the public, we had a yearly visitation of 30,000 people. Currently, in a non-COVID year, we estimate our visitation at 130 to 140,000 people. So it has grown exponentially. This leads us to where I come in. When I started as director 3 years ago, one of the questions that was posed to me when I started is, what are you going to do with the farm? And I told it through this tale, the tale of two farms. There is a preservation aspect to the farm, which is very important. That's the part about keeping the Wagner history, keeping Glenview's rural heritage, keeping, agriculture in general alive. The other side of that is we get a lot of modern questions about agriculture. We have inadvertently become the facility of choice for people to come ask questions about where their food comes from and what is a good choice for what kind of food that they should eat, or the policies that go into making and growing that food. So we wanted to address both of those topics, both the historic aspect and the modern agriculture aspect. And so we set down a course of what we call comparative agriculture, which is a means of showing people what farming would have looked like in the 1920s and what that same operation might look like today. So we have essentially a 1920s dairy barn. It's actually from 1936, but it serves as our 1920s example of what a dairy barn would have looked like, with wooden stanchions lined up in rows and cows coming into being milked. And we have a modern milking parlor in our Heritage Center, so you can see what it looks like today. We have a 1920s garden, and we have a modern truck farming operation. We have a 1920s chicken coop and we have a modern chicken coop, so that you can see both sides of it. In a way, this was a return back to where we had started at, which was truck farming. Instead of just demonstrating what an agriculture program might look like, we wanted to actually do it, and show people what that still looks like today. So in 2019, we developed a new master plan for the site, which was really just a document to show kind of what direction the farm was headed in. And we went through a lot of talks with local people and constituent groups to find out what people were looking for. And some of the things that we heard were we expected completely, which was preserve the history, preserve the open space of the farm. Some of the other things we heard was there's limited access. When I go to the farm, there are no pathways. There's no way to get anywhere. There's nothing for kids to do here once they get past looking at the chickens. We jokingly as a staff always have said that for 20 years, Wagner Farm was a place where kids came to play on dangerous farm equipment. And there was some truth to that. And that's okay, except that it would be better if they came to play on safe farm equipment. So that's what this plan was designed to do. It ended up looking something like this in a map, but I'll show you what it actually looks like today. So these are our new pathways. This is now an ADA accessible site. So if you're in a wheelchair, you have a stroller or a wagon, you can roll in on this accessible pathway and access various parts of the farm. It also helps us with visitor flow. We had a little bit of issue with people coming and not quite knowing what to do when they got here. So if there's a path, people will follow it and it leads them down the road to where they want to go, hopefully. We also added some passive and some active recreational amenities. So people asked for a bago court and horseshoe pits and some more picnic tables. We provided those, and those will get better over time as trees grow and provide a little more shade. We added about 25 new trees to the property just in this middle 6 acres, so quite a bit of planting. And we developed this area that we call the Farm Adventure Area. So this is the safe place for kids to come interact with agriculture. Now, it's play equipment, granted, but kids play a lot. That's how they learn. And so we wanted them to learn about what we do. So we included a toy farm stand and a cow statue that they could interact with, and a sandbox, and a corn crib that happens to have 2 slides that come out of it. So it's fun to climb up and go down. All on a safe surface so they could, fall down and play and run around, and that was fine. So we tried really hard also to bring back some old features. Many years ago, there was an oak tree outside of the farmhouse that had a tire swing on it. It was the old tire swing that people remember, big 20-inch Model A Ford tire tied with a rope to a limb. That's great when you have, friends coming over, but it's not great when you have 140,000 friends coming over. They eventually killed that tree, and we had to look for an alternative. But we did get a tire swing in the Farm Adventure Area. It's a little bit more modern, but it does get a lot of use. So that was kind of exciting. The other great thing about this area is the view that it has. This was a pasture before, a little bit of the horse pasture, and we set it here on purpose so that you would have that view of the historic grounds down there, the barn and the house and garage, because we wanted to remind people why they were coming to the farm to begin with. We also got sensory gardens that people can come. People of all abilities can come and use these sensory gardens. They can feel plants, they can smell plants. Some of them are fruit or vegetable producing plants, and they are welcome to try to taste those or take those, not the ones from our fields, but the ones from our sensory gardens. We also put in a very large rain garden in the form of our retention basin. Our retention basin before was kind of a muddy hole that gathered rainwater and let it out slowly. It's now been filled with native pollinator-friendly plants that absorb that water and filter it, and also screen this fairly modern area from our historic area, to give it a feel that you're, back in time a little bit more. So that brings us to the year 2000. Now, in March of 2000, COVID hit the Park District pretty hard, and we closed all of our facilities. And being that we are a farm, we were in the midst of getting ready to plant, and we're well into planning and starting plants in our greenhouse. And the question was, what do we do with all of this stuff? We had no staff. We had to let all the staff go. We still had livestock to take care of, and we had, 20,000 pepper and tomato plants waiting to go in the ground and seed that had been ordered. And we set off on this bold idea that if we're going to be closed, then why don't we just farm as hard as we can and grow as much food as we can? And it came to be known as the Feeding Glenview Initiative, where we produce food for sale and through the farmers market that was still held last year at the farm. And we also donated food. And throughout the season, our partners, the Friends of Wagner Farm and NSSC and the Northfield Township Food Bank, we produced about 1,500 pounds of fresh fruit and vegetables. We donated 600 eggs, and our 4-H club, this is where we were donating. We took one trip with our vintage Studebaker truck to drop it off. We only did that once. The rest of them, we used a modern truck. But you can see the tomatoes and peppers, hundreds of pounds a week that we took over. And our friends in the 4-H club raised and sold lamb, pork, and beef. And the farm also raised chickens and turkeys, which were bought by local people and local groups. And a large portion of it donated back to the food pantry. 5,400 pounds or 5,600 pounds of meat went back to the food pantry from animals raised on Wagner Farm just last summer. So this was in truth, a little bit of a controversial donation, as people don't always like us to use animals for protein. But the people that received this were very thankful that we were willing to not only grow these animals, but that people in the community were willing to spend their own money to donate this back to the food pantry. So we felt pretty good about it. We in fact won 2 awards for this program. The Illinois Parks and Rec Association gave Wagner Farm their Program of the Year award for the whole state of Illinois for Feeding Glenview. And the Glenview Park District also recognized us with an Impact Award, which is given to staff who have most greatly impacted the community. And so we were very humbled and proud to receive those accolades for really doing just things that farmers know how to do. So that brings us to what is next. What is the future of Wagner Farm? We hope that we have set ourselves up with the infrastructure now to be able to really fulfill our mission with the numbers of people that visit yearly. There's one more step left in the master plan, and that is the Heritage Center. This great building that we built back in 2006. It's a wonderful facility, but it was meant for about half as many people as it sees now. And so we have some mechanical issues and programmatic issues to look into, how the exhibits are going to work, how we're going to manage to air condition it, how we can get enough restroom access for everybody that wants to come. The other thing that we would like to add is, I mentioned we have a modern dairy parlor in this building. It does not sell a drop of milk, and it hasn't for the last 15 years. It was set up for demonstration only, and at the time, that was really the only option that we had. But things have progressed in the dairy industry to the point that we would like to retrofit this parlor to meet grade A standards and start selling milk from Wagner Farm again, which would be the first time in several decades that has happened. It's a big project, and it's a little hard to sell a dairy operation monetarily. They don't make money, even for farmers. It's a very difficult life to run a dairy farm and try to make a profit. But there is a pretty strong, I won't say need, but a will in the community to have a product come out of this farm, whatever that product is. So it's something that we're looking at and trying to hash out currently. So that's what's coming up next. And we look forward to seeing you at Wagner Farm. We hope that everyone gets a chance to come back out again. And if not, maybe we'll reach out to you this way. We do virtual programs to schools and other groups, and including this one now. And we would love to come back and share more about what we do and talk with all of you. So that's my presentation in a nutshell. I am happy to open it up to questions if people have them. And I can talk for hours, so it's just a matter of how much time you want to give me. So.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Jill cannot be with us. Her computer isn't working properly. So I'll take over and field the questions. John, you want to start off? You got to unmute yourself, John.
I'm unmuted. Yeah, okay. Yeah, in the past, I've donated a lot of seeds to Wagner Farm, and particularly I donated seeds of this fabulous Greek eggplant, which you grow and sell to the members of the church across the street. Mm-hmm. And if there's any other seeds that you're interested in growing, let me know, because if it grows anywhere in the world, almost, I can get you the seeds for it through my connections in like Seed Savers and with the U.S. Department of Agriculture and so forth. So I'm at your service. As a matter of fact, if you want to grow garlic, I've got the best garlic in the world. So let me know.
We talked about that, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we do grow a large variety of different, crops and varieties within. It's not just one tomato we grow. We grow a lot of varieties of all of the things that we grow. And we're always looking for the ones that work best, the ones people are looking for, the ones that have the best flavor, but that also work in our soil. So, yeah, I think I have a group of people that would like to reach out to you, John, and pick your brain on some of that stuff. But
I'm here.
Yeah,
I'm here.
Yeah.
Jonathan, I have a question. Before the Wagners got the farm,
yes,
you said that Hoffman, somebody by the name of Hoffman,
correct,
owned the land.
Yeah.
Now, was that acquired from the Indians or how?
No. So, and I should have written it down because I knew this would come up. So this land was surveyed in the 1830s, I'm going to say in the late 1830s by the government, and it was opened up for sale once it was surveyed. And it was first purchased by a man named Dutton, D-U-T-T-O-N, who was most likely a New Englander that had either come out to farm or was a land speculator. We don't know. And at some point after that, he sold it to the Hoffman family. There's two Hoffmans. One is named Peter, and I can't remember his father's name right offhand. But his father was the one that purchased it from Dutton. And the reason that I say we think the Hoffmans are cousins, Julia Wagner, Johann's wife, her father's mother was a Hoffman, I believe, if I have the history right. And the Wagners label the Hoffmans as their sponsor when they immigrate into the country. So they were coming here because they had friends named the Hoffmans who were going to help them get started, and they were probably cousins in that very interconnected family, way of immigrating. The Hoffmans owned it until 1902 when Thomas purchases it from them.
There is a question. They want to know about you. Did you grow up on a farm?
Yeah, so I did. I'm originally from central Indiana, and that's where I grew up. My parents had a small farm. They both worked off the farm, but it was a very rural area, and that's what everybody did. We all lived on farms and produced stuff, and also had other jobs. My background is in history. That's what I studied, and I always wanted to work in museums. And it just kind of lined up for me that agriculture and museums are deeply related in American history. So it became beneficial to me if I wanted to work full time to farm as a museum person. So that's what I did. And that's what I've done for most of my career, is study agriculture history.
And another question is, how many acres do you have now?
Okay.
And how many?
So the farm is just under 19 acres.
Okay.
It was basically 20 acres. They had 40, and they sold half of that off on the west side, which would become Glen Oak Acres subdivision. And they kept 20, but we've lost a little bit because of the widening of Lake Avenue and Wagner Road. So we're just under 19 acres currently.
And that same person asked the question, is there a charge to visit the farm?
There is not. No, we do charge for some special programs. So if there's an instructor involved, like a brochure program that we offer through the Park Service or the Park District, there may be a charge for that, but it is free and open every day for people to walk. We're open from dawn to dusk every day.
I don't see any other questions in the chat, and I don't see anybody's hand up. I don't know, does anybody else have any questions? We'd certainly welcome them.
I see a question in, do we still sell lamb? So we do not sell lamb. However, our 4-H members do. So every spring we get a crop of lambs that are owned by the 4-H members. That's the way 4-H works. The kids have to own the animal that they're showing and caring for. They raise them, they show them at the fair, and they sell them at the auction at the fair. So that's where you can purchase lamb that was raised at Wagner Farm. We do occasionally sell our own pork, however, and we tend to sell that through local butcher shops. So we have some partners, Hofer Meats, and I'm going to forget who else. But we have a couple local shops in the area that carry our pork occasionally. We're not doing it this year. It's because we cannot find a processor. The pork processors got very backed up with COVID. And if you want to have a pig butchered, you got to wait until the end of 2022 to get it done.
Wow.
That's too far out for us. So we're waiting until next year. Yeah.
There was a question about, I've lost it now, but did you, you didn't say you sell eggs, did you?
We do sell eggs.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, we sell eggs. Eggs go on sale every Friday at 10 o'clock when the building opens. And they sell out fairly quickly, but we do sell eggs as we have them available. So we also have some vendors that come to the farmers market that sell eggs on Saturdays. They're not Wagner Farm eggs, but you can talk to the farmer that raises them. He's here. So, yeah. Somebody
else asked the question, can people raise livestock in the suburbs?
Good question. The answer to it is maybe. It depends. So largely you cannot raise livestock within village boundaries. So if you live in a village, the answer is probably no. There are some villages that allow backyard chickens. Glenview is not one of them. But there are a few that do. If you have a piece of land that is unincorporated, then potentially, yes, you could. But the farm is somewhat unique in its ability to have livestock. And it honestly comes about because there have always been livestock, and it was kind of kept in place as a way of preserving the history of the farm and allowing us to show that background. People thought it was important that we be able to keep livestock.
And Ron asked the question, what is the biggest lesson you teach the children?
There's a lot of them. Honestly, what we try to teach children the most about food and about agriculture is how to make decisions about it. Not what decisions to make about it, but how to make them. Because we feel that is the most important part. We get a lot of people that come and ask, should I eat organic food? Should I eat GMOs? Is raw milk safe? And we don't take a position one way or the other on those things, but we talk about what it means so that they can make their own decision. And we try to, especially with children, to illustrate where food comes from. Because children too often are not given the opportunity to see firsthand where their food comes from. They only know that it comes from a Jewel or from a Mariano's. And we want to show them that, these are plants that grow, and how you treat the plants and how you grow the plants affects the quality of the food. And these are animals, and these are why we have animals, and this is what they make. So we talk a lot about that.
At one point, you said that you had to let most of your staff go.
Yes.
Did you rehire them?
Largely, yes. So we have a full-time staff of 4 and a part-time staff of around 50.
Wow.
We did before COVID. All of my part-time staff were furloughed, and half of my full-time staff. So at one point there were 2 of us left to run the farm. And we were able to bring back all of our full-time and most of our part-timers that were in key positions. What I lost largely were my high school and college kids that ran the ice cream parlor and the front counter. And I did have quite a number of people, especially educators that worked with the kids, who decided it was time to retire. Most of them were already retired from their career. A lot of them were teachers or had come from the ag world and were already retired, but had decided on kind of a second career here at the farm. And several of them felt that it was time to step away and maybe not quite safe for them last year. So we still are a little behind because of that. And the labor market right now is very tight. It is very hard to hire anybody. And so as visitation comes back faster than staff, it gets to be a pinch, but we're working very hard on it.
Well, I don't see any other questions, and it's pretty much getting up to the time where we've got to close out anyway. I want to thank you again very much. It's fascinating. And I have visited once. I think I'm going to try to come back again.
I encourage it. There's a lot of great changes that have taken place, and it's a wonderful facility. So come on out.